My name is Hideki Yamawaki. I'm faculty at the Drucker School. All right. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Deborah Clark. If you probably everybody remembers, every speaker talk about Drucker, and I have to say something about Drucker probably. And if you remember, many years ago, when Peter Drucker was asked, where do you get information about economy or market or industry to write your books? He responded, if I remember correctly, well, I read The Economist for analysis, and I read Business Week for market trends. What if we ask him today where he gets information? Of course, we don't know, but he might say that I will watch, I will listen, and I will read Marketplace. And some of you took my class many years ago. When I started, one of my courses was the global economy. Some of you, the EMP student, remember. And one of the cases I used back then was NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, or trade dispute with Japan, Super 301 case. Those were 20 years ago, a kind of hot topic. For some reasons, I realized that, but that topic come back to the, sort of importantly to our field. So I decided to offer next spring global economy, new version. And then I looked to sort of start searching the information about NAFTA, because NAFTA was 20 years ago, so all the information gone and nothing written since then. I'm looking, and finally I found one video clip on Marketplace. So I said, oh, well, I don't have to do research anymore these days. So we can listen and watch the Marketplace and get the good information. So it's my great pleasure to introduce today Deborah Clark, the Senior Vice President and the General Manager of the Marketplace portfolio that includes Marketplace, Market Morning Report, and Marketplace Tech. And some of you probably use Marketplace and watch and listen the information. And Deborah is trying to push the Marketplace to next phase, and we will listen from her. We will hear from her about her plan and her management. But not only she's an accomplished manager, Deborah is an accomplished independent producer of many radio documents and projects across the public radio system. There's a long list, and some of the highlights include a 2-week long series of broadcasts for Marketplace from China, reporting trip to Japan, for Savvy Traveler and the Pilot for Weekend America and others. And also, she has received many awards, including an Alfred DuPont-Columbia University Silver Baton recognizing excellence in broadcast and digital journalism in 1998, and George Foster Peabody Award, the most prestigious media award in 2000. She's a graduate of UC Berkeley in political science, bachelor's degree and master's degree in journalism, again, UC Berkeley. So please join us, join me to introduce and welcome Deborah Clark.
Thank you. Kind introduction, and I am going to just pretend that Peter Drucker did indeed listen to Marketplace phonetically, so I'll take that home with me. I have to tell you, I'm thrilled to be here, of course, because I'm honored to be asked to speak at the Drucker School of Management on Drucker Day, and this year, being invited by the first female dean of the school makes it even better. I think that's just a... I think that's such a powerful statement, especially in today's tumultuous world. I'll not wade into the harassment issue that has been rattling industries, including mine, media, over the last several weeks, except to read you this quote from Peter Drucker about leadership that seems especially germane right now. Fundamentally, the one quality demanded of you will not be skill, knowledge, or talent, but character. So, as Professor Yamawaki said, I am the general manager of Marketplace. You may know us as the people who do this. Oh, I need some sound on that, please. That was the up music and the down music that we use to signal the ups and downs of the stock market. But you know, just in case you're not familiar with Marketplace, I did want to play a little video that shows what we do and who we are. There we go.
Have somebody look at his balance sheet and say, how much money is he actually capable of committing to the campaign?
You say, oh, I'm going to pay that off. Use that card again, taking care of cybersecurity infrastructure. Wales has this whole super fast broadband plan.
What we do at Marketplace every single day is work to make sure that people understand what's going on in that $19 trillion black box that is the American economy.
Every day we're grappling with making sometimes really tough economic issues make sense and be really, really accessible and understandable.
At a time that most of us get our headlines from our smart devices attached to our bodies at all times, there is one time people don't know what's been happening in the news, and that is after you've been sleeping. So in the morning, there's a hunger for what happened that changes the picture so that you have to make different decisions. Trade, some call it. If you miss it on the air, it's at marketplace.org.
You know, we cover business and the economy, but that's really just a filter. Everything is about raising the economic intelligence of all Americans.
We're telling stories with lots of voices in them, and those voices run the gamut. We're coming at it from slightly off of center, not left or right, just off of center.
The really compelling thing that you can do in public radio, I think that you can't do other places, is bring a kind of intimacy to a story. If you can hear this Flint dad's voice, you now have a picture of him in your head, and the fact that you created that picture in your head makes you more invested.
You have to take a really complicated topic and make it interesting to people, maybe even fun to people. I love doing that. One of my favorite stories I ever did was a story about trade deficits.
I don't try to set myself up when I'm on the air as any kind of fancy pants expert. We're there to take the material very seriously, but I don't treat myself particularly seriously.
You did it anyway, it worked out all right. But first, let's do the numbers. I get paid.
Marketplace is support.
People ask me if I will say, let's do the numbers all the time. And I say, I'm sorry, it's not a toy. It's like a special thing. It's what we do, you know? Those little details that we have are the things that people clue into, to know that I'm with them in a way.
One of the things that's coolest about doing these conversations is that I am learning how many different kinds of people in different places listen to Marketplace. People have a very strong connection with these shows and with the reporters.
I look for stories that I actually don't know the answer to. If I don't know the answer, there are other people who don't know the answer, and I'm going to be legitimately, truly curious about that. And that's what I think makes for the very, very best stories on Marketplace.
There's a willingness to experiment, and there's actually really a hunger, I think, to have people play a little bit and find new sandboxes for us to be in.
We can tell you about corporate earnings reports, and we can tell you about the stock market, but there's so much more out there that is important for economic literacy, right? For knowing what's going on in the economy. And that's what we do. We try to make people understand why all that stuff is important.
So that's some of my team. I love watching that video because I think they're great, and it gives you a little feel for what we do. What that video doesn't tell you is that Marketplace is a non-profit. Donors, foundations, membership, that's what fuels our work. But being a nonprofit also means that we're fueled most importantly by a mission, a North Star, which is to raise the economic intelligence of the country. I think this quote from former Fed Governor Gary Stern explains quite clearly why that is so important. But raising the economic IQ of the country is no small task. Just, make the nation smarter on the economy, through journalism, one of the industries changing the most rapidly. Audiences are in charge now like they have never been, and they're making some changes. Almost the same number of Americans get their news from online sources as they do from TV. Some 40% of Americans have listened to a podcast, a number that was just 9% in 2008. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter are so ubiquitous, they're even influencing elections. But that is a different story for another time. What I do know, though, is that to be a successful content creator in today's age, you have to be where the audience is. So, recently I've been coming back to this quote from Peter Drucker. The entrepreneur always searches for change, responds to it, and exploits it for an opportunity. Drucker, of course, has said many things about ethics, management, culture. Let's face it, you don't get a school named after you or a day named after you unless you've said some pretty smart things. But why would the journalist, the public media journalist no less, pick this one, you might be asking? One about entrepreneurism, one about exploiting change. That's the story I'd like to share today, about how a near 30-year media brand is reinventing itself, and how what we've learned is really a lesson about the creative economy and all our roles in creating future change in a changing world. It's a story in 3 chapters. We'll start here, chapter 1, with some chickens, a bit of barbed wire, and a parking lot. Now, you actually can't see any chickens in this picture, I admit, but trust me, they were there, plus the barbed wire fence. This was Marketplace's first location back in 1989. Actually, it wasn't Marketplace's first location. The first location was a storefront in Long Beach where the founders almost didn't make payroll for their small team several times. And eventually, the University of Southern California saved them, and they upgraded them to this windowless bunker surrounded by barbed wire and chickens. So, not a lot of resource, but a lot of opportunity to tell a different story about the US economy from a different vantage point. A program that would cover business and finance from outside of Wall Street, from here in Southern California. They had a vision that to tell the stories of our economy, you needed to cast a different lens and look at people in the economy. And they believed that by enlarging the lens of business journalism, you could reach a new audience, not just those steeped in the machinations of stocks and bonds and corporate earnings, but just curious people who wanted to better understand how the world around them works. So, Marketplace first broadcast as a half-hour radio program and 2 short morning newscasts back in January of '89. 72 radio stations and a startup budget of about $1 million. Oh, by the way, as a point of reference, the Dow was at 2753 back then, which is crazy to think about. It was the year that The Simpsons started, and also the Japanese really owned the financial world back then. Literally, the top 10 largest banks were Japanese. Again, just hard to remember. Humble beginnings at Marketplace, but a belief in a greater vision. So let's fast forward and talk about where we are today. Marketplace grew from those 72 stations, 1.5 shows, and a budget of $1 million, to 4 shows, a weekly broadcast audience now of 14.6 million, 786 stations, and a total budget of 40-something million. We're the largest broadcast audience of any business news program on TV and radio. So, chapter 2, how did we get here? In short, our creative capital, our people. People who come up with really cool ideas about how to explain the economy in a way that's smart, but also really accessible. So I have a team who once explained how GDP worked by, well, let me show you this video, and you can see what they came up with.
So here's one way to think about gross domestic product. It's kind of like a Facebook page, right? People are really choosy about what they put on their Facebook pages, right? Well, in the same way, countries are highly selective about what they factor into their gross domestic product. Now, gross domestic product, or GDP, is the market value of all the goods and services produced in an economy in a year. So let's look at the goods and services produced in an imaginary economy. I don't know, let's call it, I don't know, Westeros.
Westeros has a GDP of about $2 trillion. Its farmers produce wheat and corn, its vintners produce wine, and its fishermen produce fish. The Lannister mines produce salt, silver, and gold, and its arms manufacturers make swords from iron and Valyrian steel. So much for goods. What about services? Right now, Westeros includes some services in its GDP. There's massage therapy and personal security, but that's about all. The economists in King's Landing are devotees of Adam Smith, who held that all services are unproductive, including financial services, by the way. But Westeros is worried about its GDP stats. It's not growing as fast as Bravos, mainly because Bravos includes financial services in its GDP. It's the home of the Iron Bank, after all. So to compete, Westeros decides to do the same. And just like that, when it includes financial services, its GDP increases by 10%. So you can see how GDP really is like a Facebook page. You put in the stuff that makes you look good.
I hope I'm not insulting anybody if I say that Westeros is the Game of Thrones place. Honestly, I don't watch it. That's the only reason I'm explaining it, in case there's other people like me out there. Once we spent a week broadcasting from a truck stop. In fact, to be precise, from a barber shop inside of a truck stop. I'll let my host, David Brancaccio, tell you why.
It's Tuesday, December 5th. I'm David Brancaccio. Well, this week we're coming to you from America's heartland, a place called Cuba. This small town in southeastern Missouri is the country's population midpoint, the middle of Middle America. And that sound you hear behind me, that of a bustling truck stop, is what you're hearing. It's our home away from home this week as we test the theory that the global economy is really a local story. We'll meet some of the characters central to this tale in a few minutes. But first, Marketplace's Sarah Gardner in Los Angeles with a look into today's wild markets.
Within 75 miles of that truck stop were places named Lebanon, Vichy, Vienna. It was just the perfect device to talk about globalization coming to Middle America. And that was actually 17 years ago when that was a real topic of conversation, and we were just coming to understand the forces there. We rented a storefront for several months in Highland Park to better understand and document the forces of gentrification. We called it York and Fig because our shop was actually at the intersection of York and Figueroa. And that's where the team of reporters and producers worked for part of the year. And we met some really interesting characters along the way.
Commercial real estate agent Nicole DeFloria.
See, like this swap meet here, right? This is a swap meet.
Nicole, beige suit, hair in a bun, is standing in front of the Highland Park Swap Mall, a dingy brick building a few doors down from Frank's old place. It's a hodgepodge of kiosks that sell cheap jewelry and cell phones and underwear.
I don't know how they are still around and staying in business.
Nicole spends a lot of time in this neighborhood, staking out old buildings, like Frank's old store, like the Swap Mall.
This could be broken up into like 2 or 3 little cute boutiques, and that's probably gonna happen soon.
One of Nicole's specialties is something called re-tenanting. I'd never heard this word before, but in Nicole's line of work, it's a term of art, an actual job. Find buildings with low-rent tenants, ideally on a month-to-month lease, and
kick them out, re-tenant the property with new, fresh tenants at market rate.
Nicole says she knows the kicking out businesses part can sound harsh.
I do feel bad, but it is a business, and you know, when these people are paying under market rents and we have a client that owns the property, I mean, we have to look out for our client's best interest, and it really comes down to business.
But actually finding those clients, just even knowing how to contact the property owners who Nicole would like to pitch her re-tenanting services to, that can be hard. Property records can be murky. Tenants don't always want to give you their landlord's phone number. Nicole has a strategy for this.
You know, what I typically do is go in and I see a store that's like this old appliance store that is not going to last for another year or so. So, you know, try to figure out how to get in touch with the owner, like say that I got hit in the back parking lot, I need to call insurance, so I need the property owner's information.
I had to admit I was a little surprised by this. So you will actually like say, oh, I got hit in the back parking lot.
Yeah, if I am having difficulty getting it, you know, sometimes you have to get creative and kind of, you know, do whatever it takes to get the information.
Once Nicole gets the owner's information, the pitch is pretty simple. She asks how much rent their current tenants pay. Usually it's something pretty low.
It was like $1.25 a square foot or something ridiculous.
At which point Nicole says, $1.25?
Well, look, you know, I have spaces across the street that I'm leasing for $2.50 a square foot. How does that sound?
If all goes as planned, out goes the old appliance shop, and in comes
a cool new fitness studio or whatever.
And Nicole makes a nice commission. But a re-tenanter like Nicole is just one player in what you might call the gentrification industrial complex.
Nurturing that creative capital, the team that produces work like that, is something I think about every day as the leader of Marketplace. Because it's not just about the individual who's creative, but also about how you build an environment that nurtures, reinforces, and rewards creativity. So that's my job. And frankly, as my career has evolved further and further away from being the creator out in the field telling those stories, I've made peace with it by finding the pleasure in creating that environment for others. I believe that good ideas are the currency of Marketplace. So now we'll use that currency to make big bets on the future. What's next, and what does that future look like? That's chapter 3, so we'll come back to that first quote. The entrepreneur always searches for change, responds to it, and exploits it for an opportunity. If we really want to hit that North Star and raise the economic IQ of the country, it has to come from more than just having millions of public radio listeners. That's great, it's just a drop in the bucket. We must transform from a suite of radio programs into an enterprise that delivers content across platforms, digital, live events, social. Someone once told me that leadership means living in the future. So my job right now as the leader of the enterprise is to paint that picture of the future and to understand that our future is the best parts of our present. We can help people from all walks of life connect the dots about what the economy means to them. As Gary Stern said, understand the forces that shape their lives. So for example, imagine yourself, a 22-year-old set to graduate next summer from college. There may well be some of you in the audience. You were 12 when the economy collapsed in 2008. Not really in a position to do much about that, or frankly even understand it, but your earning power, when you're likely to buy your first home, how much student debt you've amassed, all that has been affected by the crash that happened around you. So it's our job at Marketplace to connect those dots and to deliver the context to an audience that needs it, where they're consuming their information. So to do that, we're experimenting. One of our podcasts, Make Me Smart, is an experiment in an audience-driven conversation. On Tuesdays, we hold an editorial brainstorm for the week's episode on Facebook Live, and we solicit ideas from the audience about what's on their minds. What do they want to be made smart about? Sometimes it takes some interesting turns, like learning about NAFTA through something many of you in this room may well love. I know I do.
I had sourdough toast with a little olive oil, whole avocado chopped up and put on it with some salt. And I ate it in the car on the way to work, which
There you go.
people are going to yell at me about that, actually.
Really? Compared to all the other things that are happening in cars these days, people are going to yell at you about avocado toast?
I don't know.
I only think it's adorable that you didn't call it avocado toast. Like, you don't want to sound too bougie.
Oh, yeah.
So you're like, well, what I had was toast
avocado, yeah.
that happened to have some avocado on it.
So Molly Wood went out to a cafe to talk with the owner about his avocado shortage, and that's how we connected it to NAFTA. And our listeners engaged with it big time, sharing their preferred versions.
I mean, any doubling of produce prices is kind of unheard of. I mean, I've been in the industry a long time. You don't see that too often. There's some problems with trade in Mexico and certain situations going down. So we just actually had to completely stop it for a while, which was quite a shock to a lot of our customers. We had to put up signs and stuff, and people would just look at with a blank slate, like, what do you mean there's no avocados?
Yeah.
Like, we just ruined their day.
Yeah, totally. You kidding me?
Ruined the day. But I have to say, Kevin was up on the global landscape, and he had a really interesting thing to say about what would happen if all of a sudden we had to go back to the world of seasonal produce. Here's what he said about that.
Okay. I kind of find it funny that people, completely accept that Girl Scout cookies are seasonal, but strawberries, they can't understand why that would be a thing,
Right. Especially considering that the Girl Scout cookie shortage is manufactured, because you could sell them whenever you wanted. All you have to do is make them. And the seasonal strawberry thing is actually real.
It's just a real thing, exactly.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't feel real because NAFTA.
Sunday afternoon, avocado toast makes me smart. I just love that. That made me laugh. We had hundreds of those, by the way, people sending in all their photos of their toast with avocado on it. Kai, by the way, against egg on top, just in case you care. One of my favorite things about Marketplace is being able to turn from fun to serious. So, in that spirit, let me talk about some conclusions here that I think speak to the essence of what Peter Drucker espoused. We need to find ways to take mission-based service forward and make it big. Not just business should be big, not just CNN needs to be entrepreneurial and sustaining. We have to future-proof our mission. And in order for public media journalism to survive work that truly is in service of a greater good, we must evolve. We can't stay the same and just hope that the future will shine favor upon us just because we're trying to do the right thing. We must see the change, respond like a business, and exploit the opportunity. This is my corner of the world, but you all have an opportunity to find a purpose in what you do, in the people you lead, in the students you teach, the stuff you make. And I found that some of the lessons translate pretty universally. We must look for opportunity. We must aggressively nurture our creativity. We must take risks. We must exploit the change. So I leave you with these thoughts today. Seek opportunity. Aggressively nurture creativity. Take risks. Seek out the moment to make change. But most importantly, be sure you're doing those things in service of what you believe in. Because as Peter Drucker said, the only thing we know about the future is that it will be different. It's our job to shape it, so let's make it count. Thank you.